Hey everybody, it's Jacquie Luqman. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. The return-ish, sort of, a little bit, of Luqman Nation. Let me know if the audio is good. I hope the camera is good. I'm awfully bright for some odd. That's a lot of light. But anyway, it's good to be back. I've been kind of slowly, incrementally getting back into the groove of things. I'm going to be on the Remix Morning Show a little bit more regularly. I'm going to try to. And I'll be back here in this forum on Black Power Media. Maybe not once a week starting out, but I will be back regularly. It's been a trip, y'all. It really has been a trip. This whole situation, the whole experience that I had with being Abdus Baba Luqman's wife, his best friend, his partner in in revolution, in business, in crime. It's been an experience, and most of it has been really, really wonderful. And it was through my marriage to him that brought me to you all, that brought us to Black Power Media, that brought us to people like Jared Ball and Sharice Burden-Stelly and Kalanji Changa and Kamal Franklin and Dr. Layla Brown and Kim Brown. And, it's my marriage to him that brought me to the Real News Network. And it was my marriage to him that brought me to By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik and, Eugene Puryear and Sean Blackman and, Brian Becker and all these other amazing revolutionary people. It was my marriage to him that brought me to Ajamu Baraka and Black Alliance for Peace, that brought us to them, that brought us to, that got us in contact with, Pan-African Community Action and Net for Freeman and all those people. And it was through my marriage to him, because of my marriage to him, that we both got together and put our revolutionary ideals together. And that's what brought us to this space, and every other space we're in. So when I talk about my husband, as I always have talked about my husband when he was here, and definitely now that he is no longer here physically, I always make it very clear to people that, this whole thing, Luqman Nation, was his idea. And I mean, maybe I would have been doing something like this had I not married him, but I wouldn't have been doing this. Luqman Nation wouldn't have existed had I not married him. And I am eternally, eternally thankful and grateful for that, no matter how it turned out. And I'm just one of those crazy people who believes I still believe that Abdul Shahid and I were put together intentionally for a reason, on purpose, not just to build Luqman Nation, although that's incredibly important. The work that we're doing, the organizing and that kind of thing, but we were put together intentionally on purpose by God, the universe, the ancestors, the goddess, whoever you want to blame it on. I believe we were put together intentionally and on purpose to do what we felt like we were kind of called to do, which was to talk about issues that affect Black people politically and socially and culturally and economically in a really honest way, and in a way that even a lot of Black people weren't really talking about. And, that was what we were doing when he was here. It's what I'm going to continue to do as he guides me from the ancestral realm. I am a spiritual person, as was he. So I believe that, life doesn't actually end in death. And we just kind of shrug off physical, um, this physical container and ascend, transcend to another realm of existence, to another dimension of existence. If you listen to Abdus long enough, you would know he's a big old science fiction geek, and he absolutely believed in multiple dimensions. And so he absolutely believed that the ancestral realm was, like another dimension outside of our reality. And it's a place, where God exists, and God exists in another realm, and, that kind of thing. So this is why we were always so like, always so annoyed when people crapped on spirituality, any aspect or expression of spirituality, because there's a lot in this world that we don't understand, that we don't see, that we can't see, that is outside of our understanding. But just because we don't understand it and we can't see it, can't touch it, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and it doesn't mean it doesn't have an impact on our lives. So he was a big believer in that. So I absolutely believe that my abdus is in another dimension now, seeing that his beliefs were true. And, I absolutely believe that he's with his mom, who passed away suddenly 3.5 weeks after we were married. And that's an important part of his story. I absolutely believe that he's met my mom. And my mom passed away in 96. And I believe he's met my grandma. And, she passed away a few years ago, and he's with his grandfather, who passed away some years ago. So I believe, while it's going to be hard, and yeah, there are going to probably be tears tonight, y'all. So there are going to be tears. There may be snot. There will definitely be cussing. While it's really hard to be without him physically. I know he's not gone, because he loved me. And, that was the only thing that mattered to me, that man loved me. And he loved me in a way that I had wanted to be loved for most of my life. He saw me as a whole, complete person, not just as a woman who he thought was sexy. And he did think I was sexy. But he saw me as a whole, complete person with my own ideas that didn't always have to align with his for him to respect them and me. He listened to what I had to say, even if he didn't like it. And if he didn't agree with me, he understood and he respected me as a person enough not to be condescending or dismissive of my thoughts. And he made me laugh. He made me feel good. And, I felt good being around him. So that's all that mattered to me. So, it's been almost 3 months since he's been gone from this plane. And, there are lots and lots of wonderful memories. And I do have a little script that I'm going by to keep myself on track and not to get ahead of myself in this discussion. Because, see, there are some things that Abdus wanted desperately to talk about that he struggled with in his life. And it's why he started the Waters of Healing podcast after, we were doing our own show. And I was like, dude, how in the hell do you think we're going to do another show? And he was just like, Jacquie, this is important to me because, Black men really don't have a place where we can just be real about the things that we've gone through, the trauma, the abuse, and how it affects us. And I think that's really important. And, I think I really just want to do that, to kind of share some of my struggles. So maybe it can help some other people. So he started the Waters of Healing show. And, and I was I didn't want to do it because we were already doing Luqman Nation. We already had like 5 pages on Facebook that we could barely keep up with. We were doing all this other stuff with Black Alliance for Peace and Pan-African Community Action. I had gotten the job at Sputnik, on By Any Means Necessary. I was still doing segments for the Real News Network. I mean, he was working, up until he had to go on disability because of his diabetes, maybe, I don't know, 2 years ago. So we were crazy, wild, busy. And I'm like, bruh, another show is not going to happen. But it was really important to him to do this for Black men, yes, because he was a big old connoisseur of all kind of people's content all over the place. So he would listen to crazy people stuff. He would listen to conservative talk radio, and he would listen to these, Black dudes with all this really completely fucked up relationship advice. And it would just anger him that there were so few outlets on social media where Black men were really talking about some serious issues that Black men were dealing with. And that was why we started Luqman Nation. That was because he saw that there weren't a lot of serious Black people with serious radical politics on social media talking about these issues from a radical Black perspective. So he did what he did best. He's like, well, we're going to do a show. And he told me, you're going to produce the show. And I'm like, Jesus, okay, fine. So there were issues that he wanted to talk about, not from a perspective of, this is what I see Black men going through, but from the perspective of this is what I went through in my life. And he started to tell some of those stories a little bit in the last few Waters of Healing shows that he and Ray Wilkerson, our cousin, did. And interestingly enough, in the tribute that we did for Black Power Media to DMX. And that's very important, and it's very, I guess, prescient since, we just suffered the death of Michael K. Williams, and that's extremely important. But, through this whole grief process, and it's early in the process. It's only been, like I said, almost 3 months since he has passed on. I'm still getting used to the quiet in this house. I'm probably never going to get used to him not being physically here. Obviously haven't been sleeping great. Trying to map out this path in my life without him now, but also still with him, still being kind of influenced by him and still carrying on his message and his legacy, because he did leave a legacy, and his legacy is extremely, extremely important. And his legacy is in his experiences that I knew about, that I didn't even entirely understand, even as I got that it was very difficult for him as a Black man. And that's because of my upbringing and my politics. And not just because I loved him, that's just because that's just kind of how I always see the way Black men and Black women struggle with the same things, but in different ways. So I came to this marriage with that. And he was appreciative of that, because for most of his life, people kind of wrote him off as, this like massive fuck up, for lack of a better term. And I'll get to that in a minute, but let me just say for myself, starting at the very beginning here, and I see y'all in the chat. Hey, I appreciate y'all so much. I know that people don't know what to say to people who are grieving. I get that. And I've certainly had friends whose loved ones, family members have passed away. I have a friend whose husband suddenly died, like Abdus did a few years ago. And God, I didn't know what to say or what to do. And it was in the middle of COVID, and I couldn't go visit her and be with her. I couldn't go to the funeral. And all I could do was like call her a couple of times and, check with her on social media, make sure she was okay. But I didn't know what to do. So I understand that people don't know what to do or what to say when people are grieving. It's a completely awkward, just like messed up situation. It's one thing if you are prepared for someone to transition, like if someone is sick or they're elderly and you're almost waiting for the end to come. I mean, physical death is a natural part of life. So it's not like anybody is going to escape it, right? We're all going to experience this physical departure from this plane, but it's a different thing when somebody so young dies suddenly, and it seems like they left at like the beginning of the zenith of their life. And I really felt like that with Abdus, because for so much of his life, he struggled with so many things and so much lack of support that he thought, he didn't have a whole lot of life left. And then he met me. And then we had this awesome thing that we did together and that we were doing together that he was so excited about and that I was so excited about. And all of a sudden he's gone. And that was really, I didn't know what to say to people about it. I mean, people were asking like, well, how did he die? And let me tell y'all, don't ask people that. like, please, Jesus, people who are not sick. And even if they are sick, if you know someone who is grieving, a loved one has passed away, please don't ask people, how did they die? Why does it matter? It doesn't matter. The person they love is gone. That's the only thing that matters when people are grieving. So people asking me, oh my God, how did he die? And I think I really did say to one person, well, that ain't none of your business, is it? I mean, it doesn't matter. That man is gone. And I'm not going to assign any judgment to why people do that. I think that's just the nature of how uncomfortable it is, because we always feel like we have to have a topic to talk to people about, right? And when people are grieving, you really just don't. People who are grieving really don't want to have a conversation about the specifics around. We really don't. We're just, my husband and my best friend is gone, and that is the only thing that is important. So that's it. Don't ask people who are grieving how the person that they lost died. That's really weird, and it's really creepy, and it's extremely uncomfortable. The other thing that people do that I really just wish, don't put yourself in the position of the person who's grieving. Like, I've had people say to me who, they're pretty good friends, and they know a little bit more about Abdus than a lot of people knew. And, they would say, well, if I were you, well, if it were me, motherfucker, it ain't you. You understand what I'm saying? It ain't you. And this is not to diminish how anybody feels, because again, it's extremely uncomfortable to talk to people who are suffering a loss like this. I know it's uncomfortable. And I think I respected it most when people waited a couple of days or even weeks and reached out to me and said, I really just haven't known what to say. I just didn't know what to say. I just wanted to reach out and tell you that I'm so sorry. And I mean, that meant a lot to me, but having people say to me, well, if I were you, if it were me, if I were in you, you're not in my shoes. You didn't love my husband. Abdus wasn't your husband. He wasn't your best friend. You didn't know him like you think you did. And you didn't know as much about him as you think you knew. And that's pretty much what this little chat is going to be about. Because I want to make it clear that the Abdus, the Baba Luqman that you all saw, that was that man. He was that dude. He was that dude all the time. Well, most of the time. But as I said at the top of the show, like, the reason he started Waters of Healing was because he wanted to give Black men the space to deal with issues of trauma and hurt and depression and neglect that he personally dealt with, and the unhealthy ways that a lot of brothers dealt with those issues, and how people responded to those brothers in an unhealthy way that made them feel like they were thrown away and written off and trashed on. So as much as, people who felt like they knew Abdus because there were some things that I did tell them about some of his struggles, they really didn't know him. And honestly, they really didn't know me if they thought that, that was the kind of thing that I would be cool with hearing from them. Well, if I were you, if it was me, if I know you, uh-uh. See, Baba Luqman, Abdul Luqman, his birth name, Michael Johnson, lived a life of, I don't know what else to call it but trauma. I really don't know what else to call it but trauma. When he told me most of his life story, and he didn't even tell me everything. I'm convinced that he didn't tell me everything, but the things that he told me, I was hurt by the things that he told me that he went through and the way people treated him. And it was in this telling of his story, some of which you can hear on Salafu Mac's podcast and on the episode of The Last Dope Intellectual, where we talked about how we met and our love story. And he talked about a little bit of his past, but that was a tiny sliver of what that man went through. But in dealing with my grief and going to a therapist, I've been in therapy for, 3 years, probably longer, actually, now that I think about it. And my therapist helped me make some connections to some things that Abdus told me about himself over the course of our marriage that were really traumatic for me to hear. And I was so hurt that he was so hurt by these things and the way people treated him because of these things, but I never made the connection and the importance of what all of these things put together really meant, and how important it is to make this connection public for Abdus and for other brothers and for people who love our brothers. That's what he wanted to do. So this is going to be real difficult. This is going to be one of those real difficult conversations, one of a few, but I have to have it. Because, see, Abdus struggled with self-esteem. Believe it or not, he struggled with his self-esteem. I thought he was the best thing since wheat bread. I really did. But he didn't think that way about himself. And he didn't think that way about himself because of the multiple traumatic experiences he had, from childhood into early adulthood, into adulthood, and he would describe himself in ways that were so negative. And and I struggled with my self-esteem for a long time. So I understood, I thought I understood what I was looking at when I would see him talk about himself in this way. I thought that he was just being, he's just got a self-esteem problem. But I didn't understand that it was bigger than this, because, he would always say things, he would never say things about himself like, I'm a pretty intelligent brother. And I know, you don't want to be around people who are like always patting themselves on the back about how great they are, right? You don't want that. But it's like he would never give himself credit for things that he was very good at. And he was very good at a lot of incredible things, as you have seen. But he would describe himself as, he was always impulsive. He would say to me, I've always been impulsive. I could never manage money. I never liked being told what to do. I always had a hard time controlling my emotions when somebody would hurt me, or I felt like somebody disrespected me, or somebody betrayed my trust. And from what he told me, that happened a lot. People did that to him a lot. He was disrespected a lot. His trust was betrayed a lot. he was deeply, deeply disturbed by his financial situation. I mean, he was a working class Black man, blue collar brother, drove a truck, didn't make a lot of money, and had even less because, honestly, because not because he was impulsive and because he couldn't handle money, which is how he thought of it, but mostly it was because child support enforcement was after him for like $12,000 in arrears for years. And this wasn't because he didn't want to pay, understand. It was because that's the nature of the child support system. And he was subjected to the whims of the court system that really didn't care if a Black man could survive. Having half his paycheck yanked, or sometimes all of his paycheck yanked, for child support that nobody had to go to the court in order to get paid. You understand what I'm saying? And that's a conversation for another day. But the whole financial situation was really, really difficult for him because he was an old school brother. You know, he felt like it was his responsibility to be able to take care of himself, and, you know, he should be able to stand on his own 2 feet. And, you know, he was embarrassed and ashamed that he didn't have a lot. And he said to me one time, you know, if I was by myself, you know, when I was by myself, that was, I guess, okay. But when I met you, I was really angry that my financial situation put me in a position where I couldn't do for the woman I loved the things that I wanted to do for her that you deserved. And that really kind of pissed me off. like when he told me that, because when I met this dude, I knew he didn't have much. I knew he didn't have much, and I didn't care, because that's not why I married him. That's not why I fell in love with him. I loved him because he was a smart brother. He was a good dude. He made me feel good. I felt good around him. He respected me. He cared for me. And I was looking for companionship and someone to share and enjoy life with. I was not looking for somebody to take care of me. I was not one of those "can you pay my bills" kind of girls. I hated that song from Destiny's Child, y'all. I can't tell you how much I hated that song. Because I think that whole genre of music from Black women just really just kind of fucked some of us up into believing that men are worthless, that Black men are worthless to us unless they can financially support all of our dreams and whims. And I mean, that was always kind of weird to me, because I didn't know any Black women who ever thought like that. Like, all the Black women in my life, like, they were cool working because they had to, but they also understood that Black men had it hard, and a whole lot of brothers out here were working class and, you know, blue collar and didn't make a lot of money, and they were appreciative if a brother could help, but they wanted someone to respect them and to help carry the load. But nobody I knew in my family was looking for somebody to pay their bills. So when I met Abdus, I was not looking. That's not where I come from. That's not, nuh-uh. But for him, it was such, the whole child support enforcement thing was such a huge issue. And not just because of the financial situation, because that was incredibly unfair, but because of the way that it represented how little people cared, people who should have cared about him and should have been concerned about him, didn't care how that man lived or whether he could live or not. They just wanted to make sure they got their check every month. And this I'm not talking about his kids. So you know, Abdus was not one of those type of brothers, though. Like I said, it wasn't because he didn't want to pay. He did not work so that he couldn't pay child support. They would take his whole check for many years, and he would work 2-3 jobs just so he could have enough money to live himself. And he would have to work those jobs off the books. So, you know, I've seen this kind of thing happen with men in my family. So, I mean, this was not like unusual to me. Like, but when we were dating, and I drove up to visit him in New Jersey one time, And we had this whole great weekend planned. We were going to go to the movies and we were going to have dinner. And I mean, like, dinner for us was like Red Lobster. He was trying to take me to some fancy ass restaurant. And I'm like, dude, can we just please go to Red Lobster? I'm cool with that. Can I have some seafood pasta? I'm all right with that. He didn't get that I was just not one of those chicks. I just wasn't. So he was like, cool, we're going to go eat dinner. We're going to go to the movies. We're going to go to the park. And, I'm going to take you to the waterfall and, all this kind of stuff. And I get there Friday night. We go to the bank, to his bank, to get money out. And every dime was gone. He had saved around $500-$600. And New Jersey Child Support Enforcement has snatched every dime of his money. And he didn't know until I get there and he goes to the bank to get money out to take his girl out over the weekend. He was so crushed and he was so angry and he was so hurt and he was so embarrassed and so ashamed that for the whole weekend, I mean, he just couldn't shake it. And I mean, I wasn't tripping about it. I was like, okay, that's fucked up, but all right, I got money, we can still have a good time. But he couldn't let it go. And that was like a recurring theme throughout our marriage. He really had a hard time reconciling with money in any kind of form. He didn't like to talk about money. But when he got money, he could be kind of reckless. And, he was perpetually angry at the whole child support situation. Every time he got a letter from New Jersey Child Support Enforcement, I mean, this rage would come back no matter how financially stable we were, because we were actually doing okay together. It was just something. And I knew it wasn't like he was just generally angry at this, as angry as I was at the whole thing. I had actually mapped out, a plan. It's like, okay, look, in by this year, we will have paid this off. Because I mean, see, this is how child support enforcement works. They take your tax returns. They take everything. They will take everything. Any extra little bit of money that you have, they snatch it. So he never got a tax return for over a decade. When we got married, I had to file an additional form with our taxes so that we could get my portion of our tax refunds back. Otherwise, child support enforcement would have taken that. And they did 1 year, the first year we were married. I didn't even realize it. Those stimulus checks, the first one, child support enforcement got that. So, I mean, this kind of thing, he'd been dealing with it for decades. Again, not because he didn't want to pay, but because he couldn't live. And people didn't care that he couldn't live, and that hurt him deeply. It hurt him deeply. But here we are in a more financially stable situation, and I'm like, dude, don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. Look, I mean, he couldn't get a passport. We didn't have a honeymoon. Because I wanted to go on a cruise. He'd never been on a cruise. I'd never been on a cruise. And then I found out when we got married that because he owed more than $2,500 in child support arrears, he could not get a passport. So we put off our honeymoon. We were like, well, let's just go on, a little trip where we don't need a passport. But I had worked out a plan. Like, look, let them take your half of the taxes. Let them go ahead and take out the child support, because by this time, and I think it would have been like 2022, it would have been next year, child support, those arrears would have been paid down enough to below $2,500 where he would have been able to finally get a passport and we could start to travel the way that we had planned. And I'm going to stop because I don't want to start talking shit about people right now, which is what I really want to do. And I don't want to make this about other folks, but y'all know how child support works. That money doesn't go to the state. A lot of it doesn't go to the state, and it didn't go to his kids. And I'm going to leave it right there. So, his inability to And I saw it as like an inability to let things go. But I felt like it was part of like this whole unaddressed trauma thing, right? This the trauma of being sexually abused as a young boy by one of his mother's good friends, and not knowing how to deal with that, although his mama kicked her ass in the middle of the street, because that's what we used to do back then. The trauma of being mistreated by some adults, not like his parents, but other adults, not being able to rely on adults to protect you as a kid, and having that stuff stay with you and continually resurfacing and causing feelings of anger and shame and sorrow and feelings of worthlessness. I just figured, he just needed therapy and he never got it. And this is, the general problem with most Black people. But for Abdus, these issues, as he explained his life to me and the things that he went through, the way they manifested themselves in his life, he was often described by people who should have had compassion for him, who should have understood him, who should have had his back, who should have supported him. He was often described or treated by people as overly sensitive or immature or irresponsible or trifling and selfish. And even though I experienced some of those like mood swings, and I saw them as mood swings, like he could be really, really happy and excited about anything, a movie that was coming out that we both wanted to see, and, really enjoying conversations about science and spirituality, or, just taking a great walk in the woods with the dog, really, really excited about those things. But also being so incredibly creative that he would come up with these great ideas like in rapid succession, and he would want to do them all at once. And I'd be like, dude, we're overworked as it is. And then he'd almost immediately swing to this like irritable, frustrated kind of, you're crushing my dreams, and this is how people always kind of treat me, and sinking into a depression kind of. So yeah, I saw the mood swings, but I didn't know what they were, and neither did he. See, he thought that he struggled from depression. He knew that his mother struggled with depression. He understood that he struggled with depression. But what Abdus really struggled with was bipolar disorder. And he didn't know it because he was never diagnosed with it until 3 years ago. Understand what I'm saying here. And this is one of the topics that he wanted to talk about on his show, the way mental illness among Black people, in particular Black men. Now, and I'm not talking about society in general now, the way society treats all Black people. I'm talking about the way Black folks treat Black folks who have issues that we don't understand. Mental illness ranging from, just depression, and I shouldn't say just depression because depression isn't just anything, from depression to bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder, all that runs the gamut. We too often misunderstand how these things present themselves among our people. And this is what Abdus suffered with. He walked around for most of his life. He was 55 years old when he died. He was 52 when he was diagnosed with bipolar depression. And he was only diagnosed with bipolar disorder, rather. He was only diagnosed with bipolar disorder because I had good insurance and he was covered under the insurance. And the insurance included good mental health coverage. And his mood swings were finally just kind of getting out of hand. And I recognized, okay, this is not just This is something else. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that it was something I couldn't fix. This is something that we Black women, we gotta let this thing go, where we think, we are everybody's mama and we can fix everybody's hurts with our love. Our love is magical. That is true, but we can't fix bipolar disorder. We can't fix mental illness. And honestly, we can't fix trauma even in ourselves. And that is not a dig against Black women. That's not a diminishing of Black women and our power and our importance in our community and in the lives of our men and our families. That is, for me, that's like a cry for, that's like a plea for us to get help for ourselves and to stop ignoring the fact that we can't help other people with things that we don't even have a grasp on. And it's okay for us not to have a grasp on these things. It is completely, completely all right for us to not understand somebody else's behavior that is erratic, even if we love them, especially if we love them, because that's the situation that I was in with my husband. I love that man. And I don't give a damn what he did. I mean, I don't care what he did. I loved that man, but I understood that he had a problem that I couldn't put my finger on, but I knew praying and, me loving on him and being supportive of him, that's not what he needed. He needed to talk to somebody else. So I convinced him to go to a psychiatrist. And he wouldn't go at first. He was like, I ain't going to psychiatrist. No, no, no. But look, I put my foot down. I'm like, you go or we're going to have problems. We're going to have some other problems. You have to deal with me with some problems. So he went. And he was finally diagnosed with bipolar disorder just 3 years ago. How fucked up is that, y'all? That a man walks around all his life, most of his life, with an untreated mental illness, but he's seen as not somebody who is deserving of compassion, is deserving of sympathy, is deserving of understanding, is deserving of grace, is deserving of help, but he's seen as somebody who's a fuck up. And he's treated that way even by some members of his own damn family. Don't let me start getting into that. I'm not going to get into that. that is. So that's the thing that I'm kind of dealing with now after he is gone, because even when he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and he was able to get treatment, he was prescribed Wellbutrin, which was helpful, but it wasn't all of the treatment that he needed. And you don't undo a lifetime of untreated mental disorder in 3 years. You just don't. Especially since bipolar disorder is a lifetime disorder. It doesn't go away. You don't get rid of it. And if it's untreated, it just gets worse and it affects other things. But, I think it's a miracle that Abdus survived as long as he did. But I think now I look back on the conversations that he had with me about the things that happened to him, the things that were done to him, the things that he experienced, how they affected him, and how he couldn't shake off the way some of those things made him feel, and how he felt like he was so worthless, and how he was a burden. He felt like he was a burden, and how he felt like he never did anything right, and that how sometimes he would say to me, I should be happy about this great life that I have, because I never thought I would have this life when you came along. I didn't think this would ever happen. And I should be happy, but I can't feel anything. And I didn't understand that. But my own therapist helped me understand that that is a function of bipolar disorder. So I want to share with you now, excuse me, some information about bipolar disorder, because it's one thing for me to sit here and run my mouth about it. Excuse me. It's another thing for me to share information that you need so that you can have the information that you need so that you can get help yourself if you need it, and so that you can understand what's going on with other people in your life if you see these things. Bipolar disorder is marked by periods of what's called mania. There is the high euphoria, the racing thoughts, and also very low emotional periods down into depression that includes suicidal thoughts, and the thoughts of worthlessness, the thoughts of doom and hopelessness. And these are things that I absolutely experienced with Abdus. And let me see. Oh, I'm sharing the wrong tab. I wanted to share something else. Let me share the right tab with you. Hold on, because I actually highlighted things in this one. Is it this one? Let me make sure. Nope, that's the same stupid tab. I keep clicking the wrong tab. Maybe if I close this one, that would help. How about that? That would be smart, right? If I eliminated all the tabs that are not the ones that I should share, how about that? I think that will work. It's been a minute, y'all. I'm still getting my, there we go. And I'm going to take me, let's see. Yeah. All right. So there are several types of bipolar disorder, and I don't know which type of bipolar disorder specifically Abdus was diagnosed with. We didn't get this far in his treatment. But bipolar disorder used to be called manic depressive illness or manic depression back in the day, right? Because there was no science that separated bipolar disorder from your general generic depression. But as science evolved, which science does, they did find that bipolar disorder is different from depression. And it is characterized by clear changes in mood and energy and activity levels. The moods range from periods of extremely up, elated, irritable, or energized behavior. Those are manic episodes. Those are the highs. But then they're also characterized by very down episodes. There's, sad, indifferent, or hopeless periods, and those are depressive episodes. There are several types of bipolar disorder. Bipolar 1, bipolar 2, or cyclothymic disorder. I don't know which disorder Abdus was diagnosed with. We didn't get that far in his treatment. And honestly, I guess from my perspective, in giving you information, this part of the conversation is not as important as understanding what bipolar disorder is. And this is why this is important to me, because these are the kinds of things that my therapist helped me to understand about Abdus's bipolar disorder, that I didn't understand, and he didn't understand either. He just knew that he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and that he was given a medication that helped stabilize the mood swings somewhat, but didn't completely. So we're still kind of ongoing in that treatment, but we didn't understand what all of it meant in relation to some other issues. But this is a very important thing to understand about bipolar disorder. It's usually diagnosed in late adolescence or early adulthood. Abdus was 52 when he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So most of his teenage years, all of his adult life, he was walking around suffering from bipolar disorder, manifesting the symptoms of bipolar disorder, and people were judging him because he was suffering from a mental illness even he did not know that he had. And he internalized that judgment and thought that he was just sometimes a shitty person. And don't we do that? Don't we do that? Aren't we quick to call each other, especially brothers, trifling or crazy, or write people off, or, black men ain't shit because they don't do blah, blah, blah? Bipolar disorder requires lifelong treatment. Medication and other treatment types can improve people's quality of life, but bipolar disorder does not go away. You don't cure it. People with bipolar disorder experience the, intense emotion, mood swings, changes in sleep patterns, activity levels without even realizing they're doing it. And they don't realize the unharmful effects. The manic episodes can last a day or longer. Here are some of the characteristics of the manic and the depressive episodes. And these are just some of the characteristics because you can never capture all of them, and everyone who suffers from bipolar disorder is not going to exhibit all of them. But some of these are incredibly important. And if I'm correct, see, I don't think I'm special. I don't think there's anything particularly special about me that caused Abdus to be in my orbit because he had bipolar disorder. I think more of us than we like to admit are walking around with undiagnosed mental disorders. It doesn't have to be bipolar disorder, but it could very well be. Most of us are suffering from depression that's going untreated, and we're exhibiting behavior that is a result of the disorder and the chemical changes in our brain that the disorder causes. And we're writing ourselves and each other off because we're not getting the help, the mental health help that we need. So some of the characteristics of these manic episodes, I talked about, the very high highs, the very low lows, decreased need for sleep. Yeah, Abdus would absolutely go through that. Or sometimes he'd have trouble falling asleep or wake up early. He would always attribute him waking up at 4 o'clock every morning to, well, that's what I had to do when I worked as a truck driver for so long. But no, that was actually part of that was the bipolar disorder. Talk very fast about a lot of different things, have trouble concentrating or making decisions. Absolutely experienced both of those things. Think they can do a lot of things at once. Yes, he did that a lot. Felt unable to do even simple things. He absolutely experienced that. This is something, though, that is very, very important. This is a characteristic of bipolar disorder that people frequently write off in other people as them just being trifling or just not wanting to do right. People who suffer bipolar disorder do risky things that show poor judgment. And these are just a couple examples, like eat and drink excessively, spend a lot of money recklessly, put themselves in dangerous situations. They have reckless sex, or indulge in substance abuse. And they don't know, they're unable to make better judgments because of the chemical changes that the bipolar disorder has made in their brain. And at the same time, the same people who are doing all of this chaotic, manic, risky, seemingly crazy behavior, not listening to people, not caring about the outcome because that's how it looks. So that's how we treat people. They also can experience having little interest in almost all activities, a decreased sex drive, or inexperience or inability to experience pleasure, which is called anhedonia. I didn't even know that was there was a word for that. And that was something, this inability to experience pleasure was something that Abdus told me about, that he experienced, that he felt a lot. Y'all saw us. I mean, when we were doing the show, that's really how we were a good 60% of the time when the camera was off. We really were. We really were that goofy and happy and giddy and silly with each other a good 60% of the time. That 40% of the time was a bitch. Because that 40% of the time, at least half of that, Abdus was experiencing bipolar episodes. And he didn't know it, and I didn't know it. And of course, you know, the swings in feelings of unusual talent or powerfulness, which he never really felt about himself, but feeling hopeless or worthless or thinking about death and suicide, he absolutely felt that way. So I'm going to drop this link in the chat for you. This is from the National Institutes of Health. So when Abdus was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, it was like a relief for him, but it was also like this additional curse that he felt like he had. Because again, look, brothers ain't given a whole lot of leeway in this society, in our community. Let me say that, because we all know that none of us are given leeway in society, in white supremacist society as a whole. But in our community, brothers ain't given no leeway. None. Not by us. So through all of the things that Abdus struggled with in regard to the bipolar disorder and other things, I need new glasses and I can't really see real well out of those stinking bifocals. Through all of the manifestations of bipolar disorder that were really unpleasant, that were hard to deal with, and through some other issues that were impacted by the bipolar disorder that I didn't realize were impacted by the disorder, and neither did he. I knew that whatever was going on with Abdus, he was more than that. I literally didn't care what it was that the issue was. I knew that it was something. I had no idea what it was, but I knew that I was going to do everything I could to help the man I love. And this wasn't because I was like, oh, I'm going to save him. It's like, no, because if I was struggling, it's what I would want somebody to do for me. It's what he would have done for me if he could. If it were me, and he had it in his power, that man would have given his life. I know that for a fact. I know that is absolutely true. And despite what anybody else in his life who thought negatively of him thought about Abdus because of some of his actions, that some of them he had no control over, I know the man I married. I knew that man. And I was right about him all along. I knew that he was more than whatever it was he was struggling with. I knew that people who had written him off were wrong. I knew that some folks who were in his own family, who talked shit about him and who honestly treated the both of us like shit, I knew they were wrong. I knew that despite how he felt so down about himself sometimes, I fucking knew he was wrong. And I know this kind of sounds like, oh, there go black women again, falling in love with the promise of a man. No, I saw him for who he was and who he wanted desperately to be and who he tried to be, but something was in the way and he couldn't figure out what it was. Neither could I. And I knew it was beyond my understanding, but I was like, look, I got this good insurance and we gonna pay this money to figure it out. So we did. So, I this is just one conversation that I have to have about something that Abdus wanted to have, because he wanted people to be unburdened from the things that he was burdened with for most of his life, that nobody helped him carry. Nobody helped him carry until I came along. And I'm not sitting here trying to be anybody's savior. I talk to his dad very regularly, very frequently. Hi, Pop, I love you. If you were able to watch, I know this is hard. And his dad says, I think you saved his life. And look, I don't want to be here saving anybody's life. I just wanted somebody to love me and to share life with, that I could love and feel safe doing that, and not feel like, I was giving up myself and I was going to lose myself in loving somebody. And he was that for me. So I'm not trying to be here saving somebody. I could barely keep my own shit straight. But I knew that man was worth a hell of a lot more than a lot of people gave him credit for. And I honestly hope some of those people are watching. Because I honestly would like to say to some of y'all, fuck you. Fuck you for giving up on him. Fuck you for not having any compassion for him. Fuck you for not having any concern for him. It's great that, some folks were very concerned for me, but he was my husband. He was my best friend. And I saw value in him. And that ought to have been enough. That ought to have been enough for some people to say, yeah, I'm gonna back up off of criticizing that dude so much. Because, Jackie ain't crazy. She ain't desperate. She don't have to be with him. She got to see something in that dude. And I did. So yeah, I'm in my feelings. And I'm gonna be in my feelings for a minute. Because you understand, my husband should be here. And he's not here for several reasons. Several reasons. Some of those reasons are partially, he bears some responsibility for some of his actions. And there are some particular things, like 2 things that I'll eternally be angry at him for. But everything else that man went through, everything else that contributed to that man not being here, that was the system. That was this fucking white supremacist, anti-black, imperialist, settler colonial, capitalist death trap we live in that created the conditions, that created the trauma, that made it so a man who worked hard, walked around all his life with an untreated mental illness, and then convinced everybody else around him who live under the same fucking traumatic conditions that there was something wrong with him, without looking at the system that fucked him over, because some of them were using the system to fuck that brother over. So a lot of our people are struggling with not just trauma, because we always talk about trauma as a very generic kind of thing. We are all suffering from trauma, and it can kill you. The stress from trauma can kill you. Yeah, absolutely. The stress from unresolved trauma can kill you. That's why Black people and indigenous people have high rates of diabetes and hypertension and, other diseases that white folks call lifestyle diseases. That's not lifestyle diseases. That shit is from trauma. That shit is from trauma that settler colonists and white supremacists have inflicted upon our people on Turtle Island and all around the world. That's why we have those diseases. Not because we eat pork, pig's feet and collard greens and too much salt and drink too much soda. It's trauma. And if we understand that that's something that happens in the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, we understand that there is a genetic link to trauma passed down in the genes now from Holocaust survivors to their grandchildren. How the fuck do we not understand that that's what's happening to us? We sitting here telling each other, oh, we need to stop eating soul food, or we need to stop drinking soda, we need to stop going to McDonald's, we need to get up off. Okay, yeah, we should exercise. Yeah, we should, because it makes you feel better. But that's not why these diseases, these so-called lifestyle diseases, are epidemics among oppressed people in a white supremacist capitalist society. Those conditions are imposed upon us. Just like the condition of substance abuse is. I'm going to talk about it. But I can't talk about it in this show because I spent too long talking about it. But I'm angry. Do you understand? I'm angry. And I've been angry. I've been angry all my life. I've been angry all my damn life. I've been angry all my life at how this system has fucked over our people. My mother's boyfriend, who I thought we were going to be together and be a family all my life, all the rest of our life. When I was in high school, my mom met this guy named Darnell Green. He was a fluffy dude. He has sang in a band here in DC, beautiful voice. He was a nurse. He was a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital. Loved kids, loved me to death. He loved me. He moved me and my mama out of the crappy 1-bedroom apartment in the 4-unit building on Parkland Place over here in Southeast DC over to the new apartments on Linda Poland, in the Linda Poland development. And back then it was a new and big deal because there was a swimming pool out front. Black folks ain't had swimming pools out front in their apartment. He moved us over there and I had my own bedroom. He was dating my mom. He fell in love with my mom. He fell in love with me. He didn't like the fact that I was going into my teenage years without my own room because we were living in a 1-bedroom apartment and I was sleeping in the living room. So he moved me and my mama into this nice apartment in Linda Poland where I had my own room. That was my surprise when I came home from summer break from my grandma's house that year. I think that was my first year in high school. I had my own room and he did that for us. And we were a family and it was great and we were happy. And, my mama and Darnell and my aunts and uncles, they partied like everybody else did. Everybody smoked a little weed. Everybody drank a little drink, But crack hit the streets. And at some point, I don't know when or it happened or how, but Darnell tried crack, I guess. And then I find out later in my life, like in the past, since the past 8 years, that other members of my family were on crack for a while. But I remember that Darnell, this man who he and my mom, we were a family. We were a family. We were together and it was wonderful. And all of a sudden he stopped coming around. And all of a sudden when he would come around, he would be skinnier and skinnier. And then things started disappearing from the house. And then he just stopped coming around at all. And my mother became more and more irritable. She became angry. She was impossible to be around. And I just thought it was because, I was a teenager and I was a pain in the ass. But no, my mother was sad. because the man that she loved, she had lost the man that she loved to crack. And I didn't understand that when I was in high school. I didn't understand anything about drugs when I was in high school, actually. But I know that the last time I saw Darnell he was banging on the apartment door, begging my mom to let him in. My mom wasn't going to let him in. She was telling him to go away. She was calling my aunt, tell her, please come over. Look, y'all come over here. He's over here again. Please come over. And I don't know. I knew it was him because I knew his voice. I was in my room and my mom is yelling at him. I'm not opening the door. Go away. He's on the other side of the door. Please, Ann, please open the door. Please, Ann, I just need your help. Please, Ann. I come out of my room. Mommy, that's Darnell. She's yelling at me. Stay the fuck in your room. And I don't know what made her open the door, but you know how the apartments have those little chain things on it? And I honestly don't know why those things are on there, because what do they stop, right? But she opens the door a crack. I'm peeking around my bedroom door and I hear a struggle. And I come out of my bedroom and I see that my mom is trying to keep Darnell from pushing the door open to get into the apartment. That was the last time I saw the man that I looked at as my father, the man that my mom loved. We both lost the man that we loved to crack. My mom understood it, but I didn't. I just knew that he wasn't there anymore. And I was angry at that. I was angry at that for years. But it hurt me so much that I blocked it out for the longest time. And I didn't even remember the details of it until a few years ago. And then I started to understand why I noticed things in my neighborhood that I did that, maybe a lot of other people didn't notice. Like, I was keenly aware of how I grew up in a neighborhood where it was kind of great to be a kid, even though we were all poor. And we were just roaming around and having a great time and being kids, and everything was safe. And all of a sudden, it was unsafe to be in our neighborhoods. And that was a foreign thing to me. All of a sudden, people were lying on the street. There were homeless people in the neighborhood. All of a sudden, the businesses were closing. All of a sudden, there were, people were getting mugged and people were getting killed. All of a sudden, there were prostitutes in the neighborhood. I'd never seen a prostitute in my life except for on TV. So I had no idea what these girls, women who were not a whole hell of a lot older than me, some of whom I knew because they grew up in the same neighborhood with me. I had no idea what the hell they were doing hanging out on the corner. Looked like they were walking in circles, and somebody had to explain to me, well, they're prostitutes. So I see this drastic change in my family with the loss of my father figure. Suddenly, and then my internal life changes, but I also see the changes in my neighborhood because I notice that was a lot of other people's story. A lot of other people lost their fathers and lost their mothers like that during that period of time. At the same time that homelessness became a thing in our neighborhood. At the same time that the mental health services that were available at St. Elizabeth's, the federally funded mental health institution in our neighborhood, everybody knew what it was. There wasn't no stigma to St. Elizabeth's. If you were having a difficult time, we knew plenty of people who were like, she had to check herself into St. Elizabeth. She was having a hard time. She'll be out soon. She'll be back. He was having a problem with heroin. He was having a problem with heroin. He trying to kick it. So he checked himself into the detox program at St. Elizabeth's. Maybe not the best treatment in the world, but it was something that people could get. Now, all of a sudden, people had nowhere to go for any kind of help. And all this happens at the same time that for 3 years, I and everybody I knew in high school worked during the summer because we could always get a summer job. And then all of a sudden, those summer jobs were gone and all these kids ain't had nothing to do. Those summer jobs were how we helped our parents pay bills, how we bought our school clothes and supplies for the next year, how we put a little bit of money aside. All of a sudden, that was gone. So I was keenly aware of the changes in my wider neighborhood. The place where I grew up, the place where it was great to be a kid, all of a sudden became an incredibly unsafe place for me and a whole lot of other kids like me that I knew. And it all started with that traumatic experience of losing my family at that same period of time. So I've been angry for a long fucking time. And I didn't understand all of the connecting geopolitics, the fact that the Reagan administration sacrificed Black and Latino communities to crack so that he could raise money to fund the Contras in Nicaragua to crush the leftist movement in that country. I didn't know that, but I knew that this was not a situation, crack and substance abuse, that I saw sweeping over our communities, sweeping through our families like a tidal wave. I knew it wasn't because all these people were fucked up. I knew it wasn't because all these people didn't have any morals. I knew it wasn't because all these people just won't shit. But that's how we treated our people. That's how a lot of us treated our people. It's how a lot of us treated our people then, and it's how a lot of us treat our people now. And I have never liked it. I never, ever liked it because I saw the people that it happened to. And as much as it hurt me that Darnell left us the way we did, I knew it was because he didn't care. I knew it wasn't because he didn't care. I knew it wasn't because he didn't love me. I knew that it was because there was something out there that got a hold of him that was more powerful than his love for us and himself. I didn't understand what that was, but I knew it wasn't because that man won't shit. There have been people in my family who have suffered from mental illness, who my other family members treated like shit, and I hated it. They took advantage of them because something traumatic happened to them and they literally had a break with reality. I had a cousin whose husband was killed in a car crash on the day of their wedding. He was on his way to their wedding. The love of her life died in a car crash. That woman lost her mind from grief. And other family members used her, practically locked her up in a room and treated her like a fucking servant. And didn't get that woman any help. Would lock the refrigerator, put locks on the refrigerator to keep her from eating their food. And I was a kid. I didn't know what to do, but I knew that it wasn't right that we treated people who looked like us like this, that people I knew who shared my bloodline treated people in our family like this. I knew that wasn't right. So I understand that this white supremacist, capitalist, settler, colonial, imperialist, death trap, anti-Black, racist ass, evil society don't give a shit about us is actively trying to kill us in every way possible. I understand that. And I'm, my politics make me angry about that every day because, I don't have a problem with that because, God is angry at the wicked every day. And you can't tell me that the system and the people who prop it up and the people who benefit from it ain't wicked. They are. But my anger, more of my anger sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes More of my anger is reserved at those of us who are crushed by that system, who take out our frustration and our pain on folks who look just like us, who are victimized by this system in ways that we're not. So we think that we're better than them. And we have a right to look down on them because, oh, at least I ain't a crackhead. Oh, at least I ain't a junkie. At least I ain't crazy. So my own therapist has been helping me to kind of channel and walk through all this anger that I've always had, connect all of these issues, deal with my husband's particular struggles, and connect them to all of these bigger issues because they are connected. None of this shit that happened to my husband happened in a vacuum. It didn't happen to him because he's special. Yeah, nobody, particularly targeted him because, hey, let's crush that particular Black man. No, I am absolutely convinced that it's a whole lot of millions of brothers walking around out here just like Jacquie Luqman. And we've written them off because it's so much easier for us to write our people off as trifling and they ain't shit and they don't want to do nothing, and than to consider, wait, maybe they need help. Because you see, if we realize that they need help, then we're the ones who have to do some shit. Once you realize that somebody might be struggling from something that they can't handle, you are now responsible for what you need to do with that information. You gonna realize that people need help and you just gonna let them suffer? Well, then that makes you a shitty person. Or you're going to realize that people need help and you're going to think, what can I do to help them? And way too many of us just don't want to help other people. So I guess this is my plea, I suppose, for us to in our fighting against the system, in our smashing capitalism, because that needs to be smashed, because that capitalism and settler colonialism and white supremacy is why all of this is happening to us. In our pursuit for destroying this system, we also have to put just as much energy and effort into saving each other and ourselves. We can't let this system convince us that any of us don't deserve to be saved. Because that's how they look at us. So how the fuck can we do that to somebody else? It blows my mind. I just don't understand it. There's no comfort in feeling like I am better than other people who struggle in ways that I don't. It doesn't give me a sense of empowerment. But that's the whole thing about loving your people. That's the whole thing. You can't see your people struggle and suffer and recognize that they're struggling and suffering with shit that's bigger than them and not sit there and go, how the fuck can I help? What can I do? How do we stop this? How do we educate people? How do we help people? So that's why even as I'm sitting here grieving my husband not being here anymore with me, even as I go to work and try to take my mind off of his death for a few hours, because that's honestly what it does. I probably shouldn't even be going back to work right now, but I cannot sit in this house and just think about it all day long. So I go to work and I take my mind off it for a bit. And I, sometimes I have to go in the bathroom and sit in the stall and cry a lot. And I get myself together and I go on back in there and, even as I can't go to the grocery store anymore without crying, because hell, going to the grocery store with that dude was fun. It's hard to sleep some nights because he's not there next to me anymore. Some days I wake up and I don't want to get out of bed. And I struggle to force myself to get out of bed some days. Some days I do okay, but there are days when I wake up and I'm just like, fuck it, I don't understand how the world can keep going on. I don't understand how the sun can keep shining. My baby is gone. I have those days. I do. Even as I struggle with my grief and understanding that I will struggle with this grief at the loss of my love and my best friend for years, this pain it'll get easier to carry, but it's not going to go away because I should have the life that I wanted with him, that we had planned together, that he was so excited about. But I won't. And the reasons for that make me angry. So even as I grieve, I know that I have to do something with the information that I have about the reasons that he's not here. And not to make myself feel better, because I don't feel better. But I have to do something with this information because I love my people. And I cannot, I will not be responsible for knowing what I know about the ways that we struggle, that I think a lot of us don't even realize, and act as if this is just something that I go through. This is just my burden. This isn't just my burden. This is our burden. And we had better pick it up and carry it and figure out how to carry it and how to handle it and how to fix it or how to address it. Otherwise, our people will continue to die. And I don't know about you, but that's not something I can have on my conscience. I can sit here right now today with my heart broken, with a clear conscience and with a clear heart, knowing that I did for Jacquie Luqman everything I could do. Not because I'm special, not even necessarily because he was special, but because that's what you do when you love your people. You don't give up on your people. You don't throw your people away. You do the best you can do to help them if you can. And you got to hope that that's enough. You're not responsible for the outcome, but you are responsible for what you know. Like we would say all the time in our shows, we cannot tell you what to do with the information that we give you. But now that we've given you the information, you are responsible for what you do with it. So I hope this was helpful to someone. I hope that people feel less ashamed if they're going through a mental issue. I hope people feel better. They feel not alone. I hope people feel something. I really hope people feel something. Because I don't believe that Abdus's death was, I don't know, this sounds so corny, but I do believe it. I don't believe his death was in vain. I really don't. And I really do believe that this is one of the things that he wanted you to know. Not just about him and his struggles, but about us as a people, especially about Black men and their struggles and our struggles. So thanks, y'all, for tuning in. I really appreciate all of the support and the love that you all have shown me over the past few months. It's been overwhelming, and it has been immeasurably helpful to me. And when I say that I love you all, I'm not just saying some empty words. I really do mean that. And please know that Abdus loved you too. He got so tickled when we would do a show and he would see the regulars in the chat responding to him and chopping it up, and you really made him feel good. And for that, I love you even more, because you meant more to that man than you realize. So I'm going to stop talking now, because if I keep talking, I'm going to start cussing people out individually, and I'm going to start crying, and we don't want that. I'm trying to do good. So listen, thanks so much for joining me tonight. I will try to be back next Wednesday, same time, 7:30, and I think this will be our spot. And I'll continue this conversation with some other very difficult truths that I know that Abdus wanted you to know, that he was trying so hard to build up the courage to share with you, but he just didn't have the time to do it. So thank you all so much. Take real good care of each other and take care of yourselves. Peace.